This vehicle is not supposed to be a vehicle made by somebody. This vehicle is supposed to be America in vehicular form. Hi, and welcome to Carspotting, the show in which we find interesting cars parked on the street in New York, or driving through New York. Now is the part where I go and walk off and look at cars, but I can't because I'm stuck in the middle of Park Avenue. What a weird show. Hi, welcome to Carspotting, the show in which I waste all of my camera people's time. Everyone's pretty relaxed on a good warm day in New York. There are no cars here because it's a park. People, not cars. No cars, just people. All right, this is good. I was lying to you before. I actually did find a car in the park. There's one car. I don't mean only to find commercial vehicles as our vintage vehicles, but sadly a lot of old cars are being used as sort of props as much as they are cars. This is a PIAGGIO, as you can see on this little badge over here, APE, spelled A-P-E, which means I think a bee or something like that. It's actually a very interesting vehicle. This is one of the most produced vehicular designs in human history. So this is a post-war Italian three-wheeled truck called the PIAGGIO APE. It was designed to be put into production after World War II when most of Europe was just bombed out and had absolutely no money. So they figured people wouldn't be able to afford a whole pickup truck. So they started designing and selling 3/4 of one. So you can see it's got a regular pickup truck back, but the front is basically a motorcycle. And if you look in, it's like steering like a motorcycle. And I say it's one of the most popular vehicle designs in history because you don't realize that this was actually sold under license and became all of the three-wheeled pickup trucks that you see across South Asia and Southeast Asia. Like tuk-tuks and bajajes and all of those things are all trace their ancestry right back to this little PIAGGIO APE. So even though now it's serving as a makeshift bar here at whatever this little restaurant place is in Union Square, it's actually a proud little piece of automotive history. I think one that's not appreciated as much as it should be. Now I'm going to look for the Armory, which is around here. This one is interesting because it's got a bunch of military vehicles parked outside. Here's a guy recording Super Duty. Excuse me, sir. Do you like this truck?
Speak English.
Spanish.
Well, we have a translator. How would you say, do you like this truck?
¿Te gusta este carro?
Yes, yes.
¿Por qué?
Porque allí en mi país no hay coches como estos. No hay coches de este estilo.
Have you seen other cars that trucks or cars that you like in America?
Me he dado cuenta que Chevrolet, muchos Chevrolet, coches grandes Chevrolet. Y también me llama mucha atención ese coche.
In Spain, are you in like a big city or in a small town?
En España, en Córdoba, Andalucía, Andalucía, Córdoba. No, comparado con Nueva York, small.
Do you think this truck would fit on your street?
No, sí cabe, no es tan pequeño, no es tan pequeño. Cabe, además que estos vendrían bien porque es campo, por allí es más campo que ciudad.
You should get one. You should get one.
Me voy a tener que llevar uno, lo que pasa es que en el avión no va a caber.
They're cheap as hell over here. You should just bring it on over.
¿Tan barato? Bueno, aquí lo que pasa es que allí la gasolina es muy cara, aquí es más barata. Allí todos los coches son de gasoil.
You should just fill your luggage with some gas and then fly back with it.
Me llevo gasolina, ¿no? Gasolina allí.
Since we're tourists, basically, even though we live here, it's fun to see. You never really notice what is so different about what's right in front of you. This is a New York City Parks vehicle, because we're right by the Union Square Park. It's an F2 or 350, which to me is just another truck, because I live in America and there are tons of these, but these Spanish tourists are like, oh my God, I have to take video of this gigantic truck, which should be the size of like a commercial vehicle back in Spain. Well, still, let's continue and try to find some even bigger trucks. I promise even larger. Cordoba! There's a Cordoba car. The Chrysler Cordoba, which was marketed by Ricardo Montalban, who was a pioneering Spanish-speaking actor in Hollywood. Wow, what a turnaround. The Chrysler Cordoba is best known for its ad, which I think is actually misquoted as having rich Corinthian leather. I think in the ad he actually says fine Corinthian leather.
I request nothing beyond the thickly cushioned luxury of seats available even in soft Corinthian leather.
Which was funny because there's no such thing as Corinthian leather. And it was just Chrysler just making stuff up in the 70s. The reason Chrysler, of course, was making stuff up about its interiors in the 70s was because in 1973 there was the oil crisis, which pushed for not only stricter emission standards, but also you really had to get better fuel economy. Leaded gasoline was going out, high compression engines were going out. Gas was expensive. People weren't buying high horsepower cars anymore. So Detroit had to figure out reasons to get people to buy cars when they weren't marketing them on power and performance. So you would start seeing them market things on luxury. So something that they would have tried to sell as a muscle car in the 60s, in the 1970s they would have tried to sell as a personal luxury car. So that's why Chrysler went from its heydays of Dodge Chargers, that the Duke boys were jumping away from Sheriff whomever, to Ricardo Montalban telling you about a leather which doesn't exist. Yes, here we are. I should also say this is Gramercy Park, New York City's only private park. I don't know if it's its only. It's certainly its most famous. You have to live around here to get a key to be able to enter it. As such, it's this nice little pocket of quietude in the middle of the city. I just want to point out this super sweet Jeep Grand Cherokee, which would have been the next big Jeep after the XJ Cherokee. This was the one that came after. It's like the XJ, except bigger. And this is from the early 90s on. So I think this was sold from 93 on. Anyway, another very popular vehicle for Jeep. As you can see, this is in a really nice condition. Here's the owner. We're doing a show on interesting cars parked on the street in New York. Do you mind if I ask you a question or two about this lovely Jeep?
It's my work truck.
Could you say it again?
It's my work truck.
How is it? Is it reliable or?
It's got 300,000 miles on it.
Not bad. And it's the V8 in these things, right?
No, this one's got the 6.
Is it the old 4-liter or?
Yeah. The 8s are no good. I never left. The 6 are the best. I never, like I said, this thing has almost 300,000 miles on it.
They're sick. I mean, have you ever has it only ever just been like a construction vehicle for you, or?
No, I bought it as a personal vehicle, and I didn't have the heart to trade it in. They offered me like $500 for it.
Oh man, yeah, no, it's good.
So she stayed with me, and she goes to work, and she works every day, knock wood, and get beat up, but she keeps going. She's like me. She's old and beat up, but it keeps going.
Well, it looks like it's been good to you.
It's been very good to me, yeah. I love it, you know.
The thing is, if you're talking to random people about their cars, they'll clam up because they're like, what do you want to know about my car? You don't need to know that about my car. But if you're like, oh, what an interesting car. This thing is so cool. They're like, it is. I would love to talk about it. But that's how you do it. Observe, this is quite interesting. New York being an old town, there are still old armories. And while I only know this armory for having art shows in it, it's always fun to turn the corner in the middle of Manhattan and find large military vehicles parked on the street. I want to point out, to give you a sense of scale, we're actually very lucky to have a rather nice XJ Jeep Cherokee, this being a 99, even younger than the last one we looked at, with nice street tires on it, actually. And then, so this is like a truck, and this is a truck. This is a proper genuine military vehicle, which is, I guess, here because of the armory. And so every so often, you'll be walking around and you'll turn the corner, and then boom, here's the armory, and here is this full, vast military truck, full in desert regalia, ready to blow up ISIS or whatever. Obviously, you're not selling the newest model to someone walking into the dealership every year, so they don't have, they feel less inclined to really advertise who makes them. This vehicle is not supposed to be a vehicle made by somebody. This vehicle is supposed to be America in vehicular form. It's just funny seeing how huge they are parked on the street, because everyone is always telling you in like a car website, oh, it'd be a good city car, it's small. And then you go into an actual city in the midst of Manhattan, and there's this. Joint Base Lewis MCCH. It's for outbound freight only, so this is a truck. Even though it's a military vehicle, it's really for hauling stuff around, just military stuff of the military. Yeah, I mean, look at this thing. It is charming how much sort of interesting stuff you can find. If I'm not mistaken, this would be to have some sort of I think this would have a tire reinflation system, which would be all of this gobbledygook, in that the tire could be blown out and then reinflated through the vehicle. I think, I don't know that for sure. And there's also lots of very fun stuff that you don't get to see in regular cars, because they're obviously not meant to be sold to people and be parked in your driveway. They're supposed to be used and serviced. So all of the instructions of them, instead of being in an owner's manual, are just spray painted right on. You can see it set up like a regular sort of Isuzu delivery truck or a UD or whatever, where the cab lifts forward and your gigantic, presumably huge diesel engine is in it. I feel bad that I don't know as much about these things as I should. Middle school me would be very disappointed, because I really liked trucks and things like this. I think these are actually the most handsome of all of these sort of military trucks. These ones. Oh, and there's a Hummer on the street. Let's go check this out. Oh, look, people love this thing. There are tourists already looking at it. This is a real Hummer, not like the stuff that you would buy at dealerships in 2006 or whatever. It's a real-ass military Humvee, HMMWV, which stands for Hummer Most Motor Vehicle. This was the vehicle to sort of supersede America's long-standing run of Jeeps, which is why it's still got this face, which looks aggro for the time, but actually in comparison to today's much more oppressive military vehicles, it's actually pretty calm and collected by all things. By regular car standards, this thing is unbelievably beefy. I mean, like a regular car. The PIAGGIO that we saw not that long ago was a 3-lug wheel. And this one, I'm not even going to bother counting it. If you're on the internet, you have all the time in the world to count each and every one of them. You could pause this video and then count them all. And then I would look really stupid by comparison. You can see it's got some sort of stuff that are ready for maintenance. It's got little wheel chocks so it doesn't roll ahead. And it's got actually what looks like a oil change bin tied in together. And also, since it's this is a pickup trucky version in New York City, someone has thrown trash into it. Because if there's anything New Yorkers are, it is disrespectful of absolutely everyone, even if there are people in the military right now. Hi, guy looking at me from up the street. Hey, friend. Hey, cool. It's super wide in there. So it only seats like 4, but there's this huge, massive transmission tunnel, so they can be 4-wheel drive. These things, people who buy the civilian versions of them will love to tell you how bad they are to drive around because they're so heavy and slow, but they're really meant to be durable and long-lasting. Anyway, yeah, so this is what the real deal Hummers look like, and on the street they look completely friggin' ridiculous because they're so big and trucky. Look at this snorkel, it's huge. You could forward so much water in this thing. That's the weird. I mean, that's the thing about military vehicles is I myself am a big anti-war guy. I hope that one day all of these vehicles will only be used so that nerds like me can geek out about driving them through big puddles. Though in fact they're used as tools of war, which is fine. I mean, it's not great. But you know, they're interesting. So thanks for tuning in to Carspotting this week. I think we all learned a lot about some interesting vehicles and the tastes and trades of New York and Manhattan, and unexpected things that you wouldn't seem to find on the street, and yet you do. So tune in next week and we'll find some other vehicles, probably ones which are less trucky. This has been a very trucky and commercial and military vehicle one, and hopefully next time we'll find some cool sports cars or something, maybe some sort of amphibious vehicles. I don't know, you never know what you'll find. Anyway, thanks, see you then, ciao. Hello and welcome to Carspotting, where we go finding interesting vehicles parked on the street in New York. Yeah, let's go find some. Oh yeah, I should walk out. Well, I'll walk out now. Ha ha! Now I'll go find some cars.